it's not an easy situation. But I think Ali made a great point right there that, you know, this is not what needs to be done. I mean, there's other ways to help the Syrian people.
I mean, I think that the first and foremost thing, getting funding and helping with the refugee crisis, is the most pressing humanitarian and, in some respects, security thing to do. And I think that there's also just this. That's a big problem that we need to figure out. That this notion that there's doing nothing, and then there's doing something, which is the military option. That's a
There,
totally false choice.
and there's no in between to
There's no in
our
between. There's no creativity. There's no saying. I mean, I that like the notion of saying to the Gulf states, kick some money to the refugee agencies. Let these kids, I mean, and it truly is a catastrophic situation.
And
You have people in the refugee camps getting recruited by rebels, teenagers, to go out of the refugee camps, go back into Syria, and fight, which then makes them vulnerable possibly to attacks as well. I mean, but I think I agree a lot with what Ali was saying about where to actually start in terms of the most if it's about human needs, then you got to address the most pressing human needs. Yeah.
I mean, I'm reading stories just in the past few days of people saying that we should be cutting aid to the Egyptian to Egypt because of the money was going to the Egyptian military. And I mean, you'd think, somewhere along the lines with this talk about cutting foreign aid from a country that we're giving this aid to and it's being used for the wrong purposes. I mean, you think some creativity would be sparked just from that, maybe we should give some of this aid, we should be extending foreign aid to these Syrian refugees and helping.
A lot more money to be good. But I mean, that was the whole subtext of the invasion of Iraq, which was obviously completely catastrophically stupid and the wrong thing to do. There was a huge refugee crisis that was created out of that, and that's still one of the subtexts of the war, along with the kind of massive privatization schemes and stripping off Iraqi assets. But
according to Think Progress, as of right now, 12:42 p.m. Thursday, September 5th, 2013, the latest Syria whip count is no or leaning no is at 199, and yes or leaning yes is at 49. So I mean,
that's going to be very interesting to see if this goes through. But I think that those are the types of questions that you would like to really see in Congress. Is not, yes, things have to be done. So let's talk about refugees. Let's talk about the myriad of issues connected to this. And I actually saw a clip of Chris Hayes last night, and it was he was saying that sometimes he drew the analogy to the American Civil War, and he said, which was. There wasn't a use of chemical weapons, but I mean, what an incredible body count. What a horrifying thing. And, in that war, nobody's perfect, but obviously there was a side that was obviously better than the other side. Mm-hmm. One side, thank God, won. And, it in some respects, I mean, basically Hayes was kind of saying it needed to work itself out. It needed to go to the end. And I mean, I don't know if I would want to, actually take that position on fully. But I think there is this element where, too, even with the Kosovo analogy, whether you're using it honestly or not, that wasn't a civil war. That was helping to get rid of an occupying force that was engaging in ethnic cleansing. Now, Assad is engaging in every number of war crimes imaginable, but it's a civil war, and he represents a real, with Gaddafi, once you got to rid of that inner ring around him, there was nothing left. Nobody liked the guy. In Syria, there's a network of support, which is why it's a genuine civil war.
With Gaddafi, too, there was a large international support there, too, as well.
And part of the reason, I think, for that was because this was not there was no, I mean, even Gaddafi had to hire mercenary fighters from neighboring countries to be part of his fighting force. Like, there was no real base of broader support in Libya for Gaddafi outside of people very much within his networks. Whereas with Assad, there is a broader base of support. And that's why, it's a civil war. And it just brings it, the last thing I would just note is it just throws all these other questions into place, like the fact that Syria is still paying the consequences of colonially drawn borders that have nothing to do with it. The Kurds, there's this piece of these Kurdish women fighters who are fighting, they oppose Assad, and now in the north, which is where the Al-Qaeda fighters are most active, these women fighters are fighting Al-Qaeda fighters, and they said, Assad wants to repress us. These people want to annihilate us. They have to face a double bind. So then that implicates Turkey. Why can't Turkey get real, improve on Kurdish human rights? There's all of these broader questions to play that nobody wants to get into. They just want to shoot Tomahawk missiles, and that's not going to solve it.
The story about the Kurdish women you brought up, I think that's really important too, because you even hear, Kerry's out there, all these Obama, all these politicians are out there, and they consistently use, and not just for Syria, for every issue like this, even domestic issues where they want to draw a line. There's the good guys and the bad guys, and it's not like that. There's gray area. There's people out there who aren't on either side, who aren't bad guys, who may necessarily not be good guys, and everything in between.
There's a lot of complexity, and dropping a bunch of Tomahawk missiles in the midst of complexity isn't always such a hot idea.